Alright, hello everyone. My name is Bianca Brookes and you are watching Trading Photos. Today I have a special guest. His name is 7Chiefs. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I
Thank you for coming on the show. So you are a member of the Moorish Nation?
Yes. Moorish, when we say there's a lot of misconceptions about who the Moors are today and historically. And that's due to people being purposely miseducated, due to things that have happened historically, lawfully. One of the things that most people don't understand is that one, law and history goes together, right? You can't give me law without giving me the history, and you can't give me history without giving me the law. And that's something that most people don't really understand. You know, you might have somebody that's a history major, they'll call themselves a history major, and they might even have a degree in history, but they can't tell you anything about the law, right? And then you get some people who may be lawyers, as they call them, right? And very limited on their knowledge of history. And I come to find from talking to certain so-called lawyers, even their knowledge in law is very limited. So when we're talking about history and we're talking about law, they're very much interchangeable. And in order to really have a clear understanding of why things are the way that they are today and why they have been the way that they have been the last, say, 200 years or so, maybe a little more, you have to really go into the history of this country and have an understanding that the people here have really been miseducated, and they have to really be educated on what has transpired since I want to say mid 1800s. I would say really after Abraham Lincoln, because most people don't know Lincoln was really your last president when we talk about the republic. So you know, one of the things you'll see with, you know, our children, you know, or even when we were growing up, we go to school, we pledge allegiance to the flag and for the republic for which it stands, right? That's what we say in the Pledge of Allegiance. It stands for a republic, but yet you'll see on Main Street we talk about democracy, right? So we pledge allegiance, and we pledge allegiance to a flag that's supposed to be about a republic, but yet we talk about democracy. And most people don't really have a understanding of what democracy and republic is. But let me get back to, you know, the Moors historically.
And also,
Yes.
there was a rapper, Waka Flocka. He said that he's not black, and you said he's right because we're not crayons, so we technically can't call ourselves black.
Yeah. So shout out to Waka, you know, for and I would say, you know, I've seen his personal growth, you know, from afar, you know, and you know, I salute him on that. And he's right. So we have to understand in law, black and white, these are legal statuses. They does not, when you see or when you hear cops say black male, white male, they're not talking complexion. They're talking a status within the law. So so I identify as a Moorish American, right? And all my paperwork and everything, my ID, that's how I identify. And I'm considered white, right? But clearly my complexion will not be considered what people would phenotypically call white, right? But that is not privy to people of a certain complexion, or what we would say a phenotype, right? So white is a status. There was back in, I want to say, mid 2000s, and you know, you can go, I would advise people to look this case up. There was a brother who came from what we know today presently as Egypt. And he came here and he wanted to identify as black. And he went to court, he sued his job and everything because they told him like, yo, you can't identify as black because you're not black. Because when he came here, they had him as white. And he was darker than me. But I guess he was thinking that he would get some type of benefit from identifying as black. So he went to court, he lost because he cannot be considered black because black is a status. And in wherever you go in the country, who you are follows you. So because he came from what we know is today is Egypt, his status is white. He's considered white. So even when you go into the Census Bureau, and those are misleading as well, because when you go into the Census Bureau and they show you numbers and you'll see the country is 65% white. Well, really, maybe 35% of that white population is phenotypically what you would call white, you know? And so the majority, and even with the words majority, minority does not mean in law. When they use minority, and I bought a law book to, you know, so, and I would advise people to really, if they get a chance, to go into the law. So like with minority doesn't mean being of a lesser, you know, somebody that's, you know, lesser number. In law, minority means having the mindset of a minor. So when you identify as a minority, or if somebody is identifying you as a minority, if you're an adult, but you may be of legal age or lawful age, but your mindset is of a minor, which deems you a minority. So you don't have, so basically in law, you're incapable of making decisions for yourself, which makes you in law what they call a ward of the state. And that's just a nice way of calling someone a slave, right? So when they had the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, 1865, it didn't actually free the people. What it did was it transferred power from the slave owners to what we know today as the United States government. And what happened with Lincoln, why they killed Lincoln, Lincoln was killed because, one, Lincoln bankrupted the United States corporation. So people have to understand the United States is a corporation. It's not even the land. The land is something completely separate from the United States. The United States is a foreign corporation owned by the Jesuits. That's who owns the United States Service Corporation. It's a service corporation. If you go into the Delaware page where all the corporations are listed, you can see that you can look into the corporation page in the state of Delaware, and you will see that the United States Service Corporation is in there, and they are in bad standing. They've been bankrupt so many times, and you know that their national debt is constantly on the rise. And their national debt is and that's why it's called the national debt, because they are indebted to the nationals. Now, the nationals are the original people of the Americas, who are the Moors. So you have a lot of people who are Moors who don't know that they're Moors. And when they're told that they're Moors, they get a rejection. They kind of like, no, that's not, because
so we're all Moors no matter where we're from.
So when you go into a dictionary, right? If you go into a dictionary and you look up the word Moor, like some people have a misconception. They'll say that the word Moor means black, when that's not true. One of the biggest problems in our community is that our people can't read. And when I say read, I don't mean being able to pronunciate a word. Being able to read is being able to look at a word and have the clear understanding, overstanding, and comprehension of the word that you're looking at. So what they did was they had what they call social engineering. So in social engineering, what they did with linguistics, language. So in language, you have connotative linguistics and you have denotative linguistics. So connotative linguistics is when I use a word and the word it's not the actual meaning of the word, But when I say it, you understand what I'm saying as I'm using it. So for instance, if I say, oh, I like your shoes is fire. Your shoes ain't literally fire, but you know what I mean that when I say fire, that means I like them. That's connotative linguistics. Now, denotative linguistics is when you say something and that is the actual meaning of the word. And so what's happening is with our people is that they have taken connotative language, and whether they're in a courtroom or if they're dealing with something with their bills or whatever they dealing with, with their everyday, day-to-day life, they go into a place and they use connotative language, and they don't understand that your language can trap you. It can put you in a box. And understand, and we have to have an understanding that in law, it's not what you mean, it's what you say. So you can mean something, but if you don't necessarily say it in the right context, if you're not using it correctly, if you're using a word and you really don't have a grasp of the meaning of said word, then what happens is that, as they say in law, anything you say can and wouldn't be held against you. So you can mean something, but if it's not what you can mean something, but if it's not what that word is actually intended to mean, then it could pretty much put you, it will put you in a bad spot. And I'll give you a perfect example. This is for anybody who's ever been to court. When the judge says to you, do you understand? He's not asking you, do you comprehend? What he's saying to you is, do you go under the jurisdiction of me? Most people think when they say, do you understand, they're asking, do you comprehend? But that's not what understanding in law does not mean, do you have a comprehension? Understanding means, do you give me authority over you? So when people say, yes, I have an understanding, what they're saying is, I give you authority over me. So therefore, these people become subject to. So there's a difference of being subject to and being a subject of. And these are the type of things that our people, and people in general, but particularly our people, these are things that we need to really have a comprehension of, and how they have been using certain things against us.
So what are you supposed to say if the judge says, do you understand?
Well, if he says, do you understand the charge, you would say, I'm aware. So you would never, I'm aware of the charge. Yeah, I'm aware. You'll say, I'm aware. You don't want to say I understand, because then you'll give them jurisdiction. And so they go off of what they call, so understand, we have to have a comprehension that when what you see states do, this is all, everything is what they call commerce. Everything. When you see the people in prison, I would say the documentary, the 14th, everybody, I think that came out about 2 years ago, and it came out on Netflix. And I forget the sister that did the documentary, but it was called the 14th, and they were more focusing on the 14th Amendment, and how the 14th Amendment is what put our people, it is what put our people in a group where they denationalized our people. And so the issue with us here is that we've had people play with us so much that we don't understand the truth. We wouldn't understand the truth if it was right in front of us. So we start thinking we start calling it racism, which doesn't exist. And we'll call it white supremacy, which doesn't exist.
Wait,
so,
you're saying racism and white supremacy don't exist?
No. Now, they exist if you say they exist. But what I'm saying is this, in terms of some so-called white man having authority over you in a system that they control, and they have they control in the system, and them being able to control you in your every move constructually and how you live your life, no, it does not exist. And it only exists if you agree to that. And how you agree to that is by choosing to participate in this system. The thing with our people, we don't know that we have our own system, and we've always had our own system. So think about this: the average brother or sister that goes to court, And by law, you're supposed to have a jury of your own peers, right? So they'll go to court, and then there'll be a whole jury of so-called white people in the jury, right?
Yeah.
right. That's what's happening, right? And so they already So 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh man, I'm about to lose. It's over for me, right? So we have to have an understanding that when you go into the United States Constitution, and if you look into the Supremacy Clause, Section 1, Article 10, there's a supremacy clause in the United States Constitution, and it tells you that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any so-called law in any state, if it's in conflict with the Constitution, by law, it's automatically voided. Now the thing is this: you have to have the know-it-all to challenge what it is that they're saying to you. I tell people, don't just take people's word, right? Don't believe what they tell you. Tell them to prove it to you. We have become so docile as a people. We have become so like we live in fear, and we put our trust in a lot of people who we think have our best interests at heart, when really they make a living off of keeping us in a certain mind state, and they play off of that. And so what our people need to understand, the people that are really for you, you would never see them on mainstream TV. These are the people that are really for you are people that are, it's like you having me here, but I take a lot of heat for what I do, because, people think, oh, here you go with this Moorish stuff again. Here you go, but they don't, and that's because, but I have more empathy. I don't get upset. I have more empathy for my people because I understand the state of mind that they're in, where they don't have a comprehension of what's really going on. And if you try to tell them, for my Bible people, if you go to Hosea 4:6, and it tells you, my people, what it says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And since thou hast rejected knowledge, I will reject you. So when you reject to educate yourself or to even listen, well, you know what? You got to understand, you're rejecting the Most High. Whatever you want to call that, God, Allah, whatever name you have for that particular supreme power, when you reject knowledge, you reject that power, because that is who you are, and that is who you are innately inside of you. Understand, nothing happens to you from the outside in. It's from the inside out. So I always advise people, study who you are. And when I say study who you are, I mean from a spiritual aspect of who you are, divinely, from a divine aspect of who you are. Because they have made us believe that we are the same. And we are not the same. No matter what they tell you, what they try to feed you with this kumbaya, we shall overcome and everybody join hands, that is not the truth. That is the way to keep you in a what they will call slave state of mind, a lower state of mind. That is not how this thing works. So when you go into the religious books, you go into the Bible, it tells you each man, woman, and child must worship under their own vine and fig tree. The Most High don't want you to be with everybody. You got to understand, how can you possibly try to take care or help somebody else when you have yet to help yourself? Why? Why I'm gonna go to I remember a couple years ago, I think it was I forget which country, and it was in Asia that flooded, and I remember my son had they was taking up a collection, for the people over there, and I'm like, yo, It's poor people right out, homeless people live right on the street, right outside your building. How you want me to, how you collecting for these people in another country when you got people right across the street from you who hasn't eaten in days, who hasn't slept in a bed in a room, who's sleeping out here in the cold. And you want to go help somebody in another country when you got people right here around the corner from you, across the street from you, that have nothing. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Why would I go to another country and help when I got my own people here who need, like, they need help? You know, our people here need help. So I like the biggest thing is just there's a miseducation with the people, and you know, I have more empathy than anything, you know. So I don't really take it, you know, I don't really take the lash outs personal. You know, I don't take the, you know, I don't do debates. I'm not into debating. I just feel like that's counterproductive, you know. And honestly, I really don't, you know, my job is to give people the information. What you decide to do after that is on you, you know. And even with that being said, I'm at the point where I don't even care what you want to call yourself. Let's just work together. That's just where I'm at. Like, what can we do together? You know, because our babies are dying in the street. You know, people being kicked out of their homes when that shouldn't even be happening. Our people need to really let me go into what it is. You know, what does it mean to be a Moor? I think that's something to people really need to have an understanding of. If you get the chance, go into I would say do the knowledge on the United Nations when they did a whole thing on nationality. And our people need to understand nationality is the order of the day. And people are identified by nationality because human beings are not crayons. As going back to the brother Waka Flocka said, he said, my grandmother ain't Crayola, right? And he, you know, and he's right. His grandmother, she not Crayola. Like, nationality is the order of the day. And it's not about, you know, identifying yourself as a crayon puts you in a caste system. So even when, you know, our people, you know, they'll say, oh, the black guys, the Kemet, and it's like they didn't call themselves black. Black is that's a modern term. The black ain't, but it's not even 400 years old. And the original, the etymology of the word, and etymology is the origin of the word, where the word originally derives from. So black means pale, shiny, lack of color. You know, when you go into the etymological meaning of the word, the original meaning of the word, it means pale. So-called white people are the original black people. So when the lady who was from the NAACP, the European lady who said she identified, she was right. Her. She was right. Like, she was really right. She is the black woman. From that perspective, she is in a denotative meaning, the actual definition of the word black. She is the black woman. That is who she is. So when she says she identifies as that, well, she pretty much is right. But if you don't, for those who don't have the actual understanding of what that word means, then you're gonna look at it from the perspective that a lot of our people were called, you know, that they looked at it like, oh, this woman crazy. What's she talking about? Oh, she want to be us. And, you know, I mean, we have to understand here that we are the mothers and fathers of civilization. You know, a lot of our people, you know, people think that the word America comes from the word Amerigo. They think it comes from Amerigo Vespucci, and that's not true. That's not true. the word America is a word it's derivative of the word Moroccan, Al Moroccan. There was a sultan. America used to be ran by a sultan. And I brought some information here, to share with the people, if I may.
Yeah, sure. We love that.
So I would advise anyone that those who are really interested in having a clear understanding. I bought a bunch of different things. These like this here is a civil order back in July 2000 and.
Can I see that?
Yeah, that's from the Pope. So for those who don't know, the Pope is the CEO of the United States Service Corporation. And what the Pope did was he basically told the truth. So he washed his hands of any type of... So understand, karma is real, right? And people have to pay a karmic debt for anything that they do. So he told the truth about who so-called Black African Americans, who they actually are, the history of how they became Black and African American, and understand Negro, like these are all terms that denotes to a caste system, that denotes to slavery. And it was just the attempt to, this is part of the attempt this is how they denationalized us. There even became a point in time where any of our people, if you even talked about you being Aboriginal and Indigenous, and you start talking about your tribe, you can, our great grandparents, that was it became against the law at one point. You couldn't even, that's why a lot of them, they couldn't even talk about it. Like I know for me, on my grandmother's side, my mother's side, they're what you call Sixikawa, but the European corruption name. So understand they corrupted everything. They changed everything around. So they call it Blackfoot now, but that's not the actual name of that particular tribe. It's called Sixikawa. And then even like, I know one of the more famous tribes is the Cherokee, and the actual name of the Cherokee is Aniawea. So when you start identifying yourself by names that do not come from your ancestors, you're called a undesirable, because the Bible tells us, I'm going to the Bible for my Bible people. So, because to understand all these religious books, you'll find out once you go into them, they are pretty much the same school. These are all the same school. They may have different names, but the science of it is all the science is the same. It's all one school. So going back to the civil orders with the Pope, he put out two. This one, he has another one. One was June 10th, 2014. Another one was July 4th, 2014. And he sent these to then President Barack H. Obama. And he told the truth of everything about what really happened to us. And he told us to make the corrections that we needed to make. And he said that, that because we are the Americans. We are the true Americans. We are the only we are the real Americans. And when you see so-called white people, and
tell us to go back to Africa.
And it's like, if you tell them to go back to, where would they go? Because they're not original to anywhere on the planet. Now, I'm not going to get into that history or where they actually come from. That's, I'm not going to get into that. But they're not original to any, and they don't come from another planet. I would say do the history, do the knowledge on a European scholar. I think his last name is Smith. I think his name is Rick Smith. And he talks about how the only actual humans on the planet are so-called African people. Everybody else are hybrids. These are hybrid people. There was a Chinese guy who he did a DNA, and he wanted to trace back wanted to find out where, he thought Chinese had their own actual cursor in their DNA, and he comes to find out that they come from African people too, and that they're hybrids. Everybody else are hybrids. So-called African people, we are the ones. We are the actual humans on the planet. We are the only humans on the planet. There was a point in time where there were nobody here but us. And so through experiment, all these other people came about, all these other groups. So we talk about the Mongoloids, what we presently today call also the Caucasian, right? These are hybrid people, But then somebody hear me say that, they're gonna call me a racist and, and all these other names they'll call me. But these are, but that's because you haven't really take the time out to dig and really study. Like, my thing is this. I won't allow somebody who hasn't been here as long as me to tell me who I am and where I come from, when I know you come from me. All right? Like, we were here. So I'm no longer into that place where a lot of our people are, where they think that what they learn in the school systems here is really education, and it's not. It's miseducation. And the longer you're in the system, the more you're miseducated. I want to get back to the United Nations when they did, I think it was 2011, 2012. They did a whole thing on they nationality. Obama in 2013, 2014, he signed the rights of indigenous people. I think it was 2012, 2013. And then he also did a tour going into the Muslim countries, and he told the truth too.
Can I see the rest of those documents, please?
Yeah. So this is the other civil order from the Pope, dated June 10th, 2014. I would say, look those up. This is Resolution 331. So this is an acknowledgement. This is from 1988, where the Congress, they acknowledge the fact that the United States Constitution comes from the original 5 tribes, which is the Iroquois Confederacy. And so the Iroquois Confederacy is from, so we have to understand there was already a United States here. And so the language of law is Latin. We already had law. We had law long before the Europeans came here. And it was called Llanados Estados Americanos. So that's Latin, which translates to United States of Almarac. Because the name of this place, the name of this land that you live on, that we think is, and we have to understand, America is not a country. It's 2 continents. So when people say, "Oh, I'm from America," well, okay, where you from in America? North, South, Central, the islands? Because Jamaicans are Americans. Hondurans, those are Americans. So we have to understand those Honduras, that's a corporate name. Those are corporate names that colonizers, when they incorporated all the resources of the original people of the land. No matter where you go in the Americas, you're going to see people like us that look just like us. I had a friend of mine who he travels a lot, and I remember when he went to PR, he went to Cuba, he went to Mexico, and it was one other country, well, so-called country he went to in the Americas, and he was like, everywhere he went, he felt like he was home. He said everybody he saw looked like, he said, man, everybody I saw looked like us. And he said people would ask him, "Yo, what are you? Where you from?" Like, because they thought they would speak to him in the language, and he'd be like, "Nah, I don't." Where you from? And what are you? And he said he couldn't even answer what he didn't know. He said he was taken aback by the people because they looked so much like him. He said when he was in Cuba, he said everybody kept saying, "You my brother, right? We the same people. You my brother." He said he felt like he was home. He said everywhere he went, he felt like he was home. And he said everybody looked like us. And I said, yeah, it's because we all the same people. What happened was we let everybody else divide us. This is why I don't do the division game, because that's counterproductive. You know, I want to see my people win at all costs together. You know, we got to get out of this crabs in a barrel mentality. You know, I'm trying to come up, so I'm gonna pull you down. No, you can't. No, because when we thrive at our best when we all help each other, and we all doing what we're doing together. When we're in a unit and we're in sync and we helping each other, that's how we thrive best. But all this, you know, the bickering and the fighting about what you want to call yourself. Look, you call yourself whatever you have the right to identify as whatever it is that you want to identify as. I know who I am, and I know what I am, and I know how I identify.
Can I see the last page?
Well, yeah, this one is the Iroquois. This is House Resolution 331, right? So these are documents. These are actual government documents that you can go into the government. You can go into the Library of Congress. You can go to any government, so-called government homepage, state of Pennsylvania. Oh, and so this is House Resolution. This is House Resolution 75. And this is from 1933. And this is when they signed, or I want to say, where our people could go back to using the names that we used when we were already here. So most of our people know, which means that most of our people ain't ignorant. They know that their last names come from slavery, what they call a slave name, that the slave master put their last name on them. So most of our people know that. Which means they're not ignorant to that. So if you know that, then what was your name before that? That's something that a lot of our people don't, or they might just, you know, they probably overlooked that. So this is House Resolution 75. And in House Resolution 75, you can see, it'll say that, talks about how, I'm just going towards the end of it, Moors in accordance with the fullest right of religious independence guaranteed every citizen, we recognize also the right of these people to use the name affixes El, which is Hebrew for Elohim, which people will call God, or Ali or Bey, and any other prefix or suffix to which they have heretofore been accustomed to use, or which they may hereafter acquire the right to use. So our titles and names, when you go into, you never want to say you have a name, because people who have names are corporations. They're considered corporations. So as Moors, we have what we call titles and appellations, right? So our what they will call a last name, or your suffix would be, you know, El. We use the titles of El, Al, Ali, Bey, Day. These are some of the suffixes that affixes that we use. And this, right, like I said, Resolution 75, if you will, if you want to, they can see that.
Okay. I'll have my producer get a close up later on this. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Resolution 75, and that's from 1933. So we have to understand that the international community has been doing things to help our people for a very long time. But you still have certain who we deem community leaders. I won't say their names. I'm pretty sure y'all know who's who. You know, we in 2019. You know who's who. So we have certain community leaders who knowingly know these things, but they continue to tell our people differently. They continue to put our people in a perpetual state of slavery, which you would call slavery. And even with the word slave, and by definition, we can never be slaves, because when you go into the etymology of the word slave, it means Slavic. And we ain't Slavs. That's a That's actually a nation of those are Europeans are the first slaves. Even when you talk about the history here, the majority of the slaves here were were not melanated people, but they teach us in school that we came over, and we didn't become. We were POWs. I don't come from slaves. I come from prisoners of war. We were POWs. We were not slaves. Majority of our people were never slaves. They were prisoners of war, and we always had tribal wars. That's what started. When you talk about the American Revolution, those are tribal wars between us. What they did was they reversed the history. There's a book by the prophet Noble Drew Ali, peace be upon him. His father, he was Noble Drew Ali. You know, I definitely need to bring him up. He was the resurrection of who we were, and who we actually are, in terms of being here in the Western Hemisphere. He was the one who brought us back to the consciousness of who we actually are, and to stop identifying with names that are not of our ancestors. Because there's curses are real. And I'm not talking, warlocks, which that stuff is real. Like we've been cursed. And a lot of it is, to this day, a lot of it is self-sabotage, because we continue to believe a doctrine that does not apply to us. We continue to believe a doctrine because we've been so brainwashed. We've been so told that who we are, we keep letting people define us, and we need to be the definers. Stop letting people tell you who you are and who you can be. No one can tell you who you are, not even your parents, not your mother, not your father. No one can tell you who you are but you. Only you can identify you. So when you continue to identify by names that are not of your ancestors, you are in dishonor. And yes, and this is why certain things happen to our people. In 1913, the prophet Noble Drew Ali, and he is known, and he's worldly known as the last prophet of the times. And most people don't know that he was actually a prophet. And if you go into his literature and you go into his prophecies, things that he has said has come true, and we are living in, and understand we are living in prophecy today. I give you an example. If you do the knowledge on, I think it was like the last January of this year, January 25th, something around there, last week of January or so, in Mecca, there was a swarm of what were these? Wasp, if I'm not mistaken, they swarmed into the city of Mecca, and it was suffocating. Like, people were dying. People were being suffocated. If you know anything about the 12 deadly plagues that are in the Bible, that was one of them. Like, how a bunch of wasps and just bugs is swarming into Mecca. And these things they eat leaves and trees. They eat leaves, but they in here and they flying in. And I mean, by the hundreds, they had to clean. It took them a couple of days to clean everything up, and people were dying. Like, people need to understand, like, prophecy is real. If you want to call yourself, if you say you don't believe in God, or you don't believe in that, fine, you don't have to, but understand, it believes in you. It knows you exist. Even if you don't think or believe it exists, it knows you exist. And it is watching everything you do. So we are really at a critical time, in understand that history is being rewritten, or I don't want to say rewritten. We are at a time where Everything is laid out for our people. We have to stop with the complaining and the victimization. We have to stop being victims. We have to stop pointing the finger and saying Trump did this and it has nothing to do with Trump. It's about you. What are you doing? Like, ever since Trump been in office, my life has been better. Like, I have no issues. Like, I can't say my life has been bad. I can't say my life has been bad. And I can only speak for me. And that's because I have taken control of what I do. I'm not pointing the finger at Trump or anyone else. And understand there's a lot of things that he has done that are good things that they will never publicize on national TV, because the objective is to make him look like a bad guy. The objective is to understand the mainstream media. Those are one of the most wicked entities that you can focus your attention on. Do the knowledge on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all these mainstream news media outlets who have been practicing what they call yellow journalism since the early 1900s. Understand, yellow journalism is when they make stories up. That's why Trump always say, "Oh, y'all fake news," because they fake news. They make up stories. They do. They make up a lot of stories. So I would say go into yourself, study what's really going on, really educate yourself. You know, one of the hardest things, or I would say the hardest thing that I found, is that trying to get an uneducated people to respect education. That's hard. And that's from just the conversations that I've had with certain people, you know. And then you get some people who they are receptive to it, but then they try to take advantage of it. And you can't abuse knowledge. You know, that's the sin. You're not supposed to take knowledge and abuse it. You know, you take it and you use it when, you use it where you need to apply it. But to take it in, and I've seen people do it, and at times I blame myself, because I'm like, dang, that's not somebody I should have told that to. That's not something I should have shared with this person, because now they took it and they start doing things that I wouldn't suggest people do.
What did they do?
I don't not care to talk about on camera, right?
Okay,
so,
sure, that's fine.
So.
All right. Well, the next question that I have for you is that, do you feel that there is a homosexual agenda? Because I noticed that a lot of people were very upset with a particular actor, who I'm not going to say his name because I'm an actor too, so if I run into him, so it's not awkward. But he wore a dress to the Oscars, and a lot of people feel like, and not just this, but for a long time, that Black men are continuing to be emasculated in the media. How does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, right? Is there an agenda to emasculate our men? Yeah. I mean, but that's obvious, right? That's obvious. I feel people can identify as however they choose to identify. They can be whatever they want to be. I'll draw the line when it comes to our children. Children are impressionable. And you're not going to sit here and convince me that at 6 years old, a little boy thinks he's a little girl, and vice versa. That's a learned behavior. I would even suggest people do the knowledge on the scientist who was paid to do testing by this one major company, and he found out that they were putting certain chemicals in the water, in the food, that was changing the endocrine system of the animals. So they were the pigs. So they were doing. The frogs. They were doing testing on the frogs, and they found the male frogs. Their insides they started secreting a lot of estrogen, and the male frogs started becoming feminized, and and this is what they're putting in the water, and they're putting this in the food. These are, whether people like it or not, whether they want to talk about it or not, like, they are creating homosexuality. They are literally doing it. If you do the knowledge on it, don't take my word on it, do the knowledge on it.
So you don't think that people are born gay?
How do you, this is my thing. How can you be born something when innately nature does not create anything that would destroy itself? So how can you possibly be born that way when innately you're born, you are a certain way by your nature? Your nature is what makes you who you are. So how can you be born that way? Now, if people are coming out, it's because of, so if you're pregnant and you eating certain things that have certain foods in them, then guess what?
If I'm pregnant, not with this figure, absolutely not. No.
If you generally women who are, if you're a woman and you're pregnant and you're eating certain foods that are chemically induced, to secrete certain things, whatever you take in is going to affect your child. So if you're taking food in that has chemicals in it that will alter the state of your child, then yeah, you can be born gay. If that's the case, then yeah, you can be born gay. But if you're telling me that naturally the Most High is made, no, that's not how it works. And the thing is, a lot of people aren't even dealing with the science. Understand everything is energy, knowledge, science, consciousness is what runs the planet. So if you kept in the dark about a lot of the things that's going on, then, and particularly now, I see a lot of our people who really don't have a gist of what's really going on. And so if mainstream media is your only source of information, then you lost. You completely lost, because you can't go to mainstream thinking that they're gonna give you the truth, because that's not something they're gonna do. They're not, mainstream media is not gonna give you the truth. Knowledge is something you have to go out and get, and it can be found in many places. Even with people that you may not necessarily like or care too much for. Don't listen or read what it is that they're saying, and take in the information and discern it for yourself. Be able to discern it for yourself. Don't judge people on principle. That's the main thing I would say to people. Judge people on principle, not because this person talk nice, or I think this person is nice, or I like the way they look, I like the way they dress. Judge them strictly off their principles, and that's how you know who's who. Just judge them straight off of principle. But do I think there's an agenda? I mean, I think that's pretty evident that there's an agenda. I don't, and if anybody that says differently, I think that's foolish, because there's clearly an agenda.
Okay.
All
right. Now, how do you feel also, because mainstream media has also demonized African spirituality, voodoo, of course. How do you feel about those things? Because whenever those images pop up, people freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, it's witchcraft.
Right. Well, see, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that so understand, mainstream, these people who run everything, they know who we are. The issue is we don't know who we are. And the goal is to keep us asleep to who we are, because they know that you come from a power that they can never comprehend, and that you have access to a certain power that you don't need anybody in the physical form to stick up for you. That they understand that there are certain entities you could send their way, if they bother you, you know. So this is why when they get into spirituality, they say, "Oh, it's voodoo," and "Oh, that's bad," and stay away from it, and and that's why it's yours. There's a lot of things that is, I mean, everything you see is ours, and we pretty much push it to the side because we don't have the understanding of who we are innately. And you know when we get there and understand it has nothing to do with anything that's outside of you. It's who and what you are inside. Once we get to that understanding and understanding of that, then things around you will change. Your perception of the world changes. Change comes from the inside out, not from the outside in. And I think that's where a lot of our people fall victim to, or people in general. Let me say, people in general fall victim to that, thinking that change comes from the outside in, when it actually comes from the inside out. You got to change you first before you can change anything else around you. So um, that's the biggest thing and it's to keep, like I said, keep you away from who you are and what you are, because diving into that is not in their best interest, and they know that. So their biggest weapon is to keep you asleep, and to keep you stuck in fear, because everything is fear based. Once you let the fear go, there's nothing else. Everything just, you know, and I tell, don't let fear cripple you, because fear cripple you. You know, if you if you really have the understanding that you are not alone, you know, open yourself up, and you can see the things that are really around you. If you do the knowledge, your two physical eyes can only see 4% of the light spectrum. So everything you see with your physical eyes is only 4% of what's actually going on around you. So what does that tell you? That means the other 96% you can't even see. There's things going all around you that you can't even see. And this ain't spookism. This is really how it works. This is really, this is what's really going on. But you got to tap into that side of you. This is why they put fluoride in the water. This is why they put the chemicals and stuff in your food and in your water, because they want to calcify what they call it your third eye, but it's actually your first eye. It's your mind. When you go into the etymology of the word man means mind. That's what man actually means, is mind. Because everything is the mind. Everything you see around you started in the mind. This chair, somebody had to think of it first to create it, so it has to start in the mind, right? All is mind. When you go into the 7 Hermetic principles, the first principle is all is mental. The universe is mental. Everything comes from the mind. So they have to mess with your mind, because if they can distract you with basketball wives and
Loving
hip hop, right?
Real world.
All that stuff, right? When they can distract you, and then they get you to worship things that really have no value. What they call money isn't actually money. It's a note. It's a debt. It's a tender for debt, and it tells you that when you look on the note, it tells you it's a note. It's a debt note. It's a promise to pay back. It has no real value. And I would tell people, do the knowledge on that. Go into the United States Constitution. It tells you what lawful money really is. Lawful money is gold and silver. And anything other than gold and silver is considered fraud. So when you talk about what people call money, it's actually it's actually fraud. It's not actually money. And what happens is people have agreed on that. And all actuality, it has no value. It has no value at all. So if you're stuck chasing that, then I feel sorry for you. You know, I feel like, you know, we talk about like you know, certain individuals who in mainstream, you know, whether they be athletes or entertainers, and they talk about, you know, how much money they got, you know, and that's all they talk about. And it's like, I feel sorry for that person because they actually poor because all they got is money. You know, nothing, you know, it has, which has no real value. You know, when you go into ancient times, man, like the people that were really held to high regard were those with knowledge of self. Know, that's why the ancients always said, "Man, know thyself, know yourself." This is why the Bible tells you the kingdom of heaven lies within, and anyone that knows itself shall find it. It's inside of you. Who are you inside? And this is why they keep you busy so long. You know, you go to work, you work 8 hours a day. Sometimes you work more than that. You know, it's only 24 hours in a day, right? So, you know, you go to work 8 hours, sometimes 12, 14, 15, right? By the time you come home, maybe you got to clean up or something. You go another hour or so. You got to eat, right? If you got children, you got to take care of your children. By the time you got to go right to bed and do it all over again. And you doing this 5 days a week. And then by the time the weekend come around, you just want to sleep all day or all weekend, you know? And people never really get the time to sit down with themselves. Like, yo, just sit down with yourself. Talk to yourself. But they tell you when you talk to yourself, you crazy. Like, no, sit down and talk to yourself. Because you have something innate that's in you, that's talking to you, that's your spirit. Listen to your spirit. Listen to it. You know, don't just ignore it. Some people call you conscious, like listen to that voice inside of you. And I would say, be honest with yourself. Our people in particular, we some of the most dishonest in terms of who we with ourselves. You know, we don't really like to be honest with ourselves or other people. We need to really be honest, or with each other in particular. We really need to be honest with ourselves. We really need to be honest with each other. And I noticed that's one of the issues that we've had in having agreements. You know, we should be able to agree to disagree, you know, and understand just because I don't agree with you don't mean I hate you. Don't call me, you know, why, you know, because I don't agree with you, I hate you. Nah, I can disagree with you and still love you. You know what I'm saying? I could disagree with you and you could still be my brother and my sister at the end of the day, and I could still love you, and I was still not letting anybody do anything to you. You know, just because you choose to live your lifestyle a certain way. It's not my job to judge you. That's not my job. You know, my job is to help you where I can, you know, if I can, you know, without hurting myself, you know. But my convictions are my convictions, just like yours are, you know. And at the end of the day, even with our differences, I feel like what we have in common should be able to outweigh any differences that we may have, you know. And I think that's what we need to focus on what we can do collectively as a people, and not so much on what we can do outside of each other.
All right. Well, this has been a very enlightening segment. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah. So if you wanna talk to me, you can email me at 7chiefs at gmail.com, and that's the number 7, letter EVANCHEIFS at gmail.com. You know, you can email me there. Oh, and you can Instagram me, 7Chiefs. Again, number 7, EVAN, number 7, letter EVANCHEIFS. And you know, anything I can possibly help with, I will. You know, if I can. You know, so that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
I
coming on the show.
appreciate you having me.
All right. And I would like everyone to subscribe to Trading Photos so that you guys can keep up to date with all of our wonderful interviews, and also to subscribe to me at Queen Bianca Brookes.